Hey conservatives, this is Kelsey again. This time we were just 5 minutes away from CPAC starting. But remember to turn to the back of your programs for the exclusive offer this CPAC weekend. Also, when you're down in the hub, make sure to visit us at the ACU CPAC booth. Ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats and silence all electronic devices. The program will begin shortly.
The Daily Signal is the multimedia news organization of the Heritage Foundation.
It's a place where busy Americans can come, find out what the important issues of the day are,
To cut through the clutter and communicate directly to the American people.
and be exposed to conservative policy solutions. The American people are a lot smarter than the news gives them credit for. They know the difference between spin and news.
We work with 100 policy experts here at the Heritage Foundation who cover a range of issues.
What makes the Daily Signal unique is our commitment to delivering the news in a fair, accurate, and trustworthy manner.
Since the Daily Signal began, we have gone where the action is. That meant sending a team to the U.S.-Mexico border.
Reporting from Encina, Texas, this is Josh Siegel with the Daily Signal.
It meant going to the steps of the Supreme Court as decisions were being handed down.
Right now, we're here at the Supreme Court, where it's just decided whether...
And we've worked with veteran investigative reporter Cheryl Atkinson.
I have far more editorial freedom contributing the stories that I do to Daily Signal than I had the last couple of years in my professional job at what most people consider a fair organization.
Why did we start the Daily Signal? The media landscape is constantly changing, and we want to be on the cutting edge.
They've been willing to let the stories tell themselves and go in whatever direction the stories go.
It's not a question of whether we can drive the media narrative. It's only a question of whether we have the courage to capitalize on the opportunity that's right in front of us. That is what the Daily Signal is.
Ladies and gentlemen, our next debate is the red pill or the blue pill, a debate on drug legalization. Please welcome your moderator, Mary Katharine Ham.
This is the moment, tonight is the night. We'll fight till it's over, so we put our hands up like the ceiling can't hold us. Like the ceiling can't hold us. Here we go back. This is the moment, tonight is the night. We'll fight till it's over, so we put our hands up like the ceiling can't hold us.
You guys have a seat. I think I'll go back up there to intro.
Did you two plan the red and the blue?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, did you?
I'll go up here to intro. Good afternoon, everyone. How's it going? Thank you for being here. I was very excited to announce to all my friends and my family, hi Mom and Dad, that I was doing the 420 marijuana panel here at CPAC. So nicely done on the timing, CPAC. I'm here with two great guests today to have a lively conversation, which we will keep nice, and even if we don't, we'll be famous on YouTube. So there's an upside. First, I'd like to introduce on my left over here, the Honorable Anne-Marie Buerkle, former Congresswoman. She's also an attorney and a nurse. And she did all of this while having 6 children, so she's putting me thoroughly to shame. Let's give her a hand real quick. I also have on my right, Governor Gary Johnson. He's been a governor, an entrepreneur, and again, putting me entirely to shame, has accomplished the 7 summits, the highest mountain on each continent. So let's do congrats for that. I'm going to let them do 5 minutes of opening statement for you guys, and then we'll all have a seat and chat. And I will put out there as a note of warning, yes, Washington, D.C. did legalize marijuana as of midnight last night, but much of Washington, D.C., hold on, much of Washington, D.C. is federal land, so you will get popped for that. So just be careful. First up, we'll have the Honorable Anne-Marie Buerkle.
Thank you very much, and thank you, Mary Katharine, for that wonderful introduction. You know, I was elected to Congress in 2010 as a part of that large freshman class that flipped the House majority. I made the decision to leave a secure job to run for Congress because I was opposed to the egregious Affordable Care Act. But more so, I was greatly concerned with the direction of our nation. I am a mother of 6 children and a grandmother of 16, and like most Americans, I wanted to make sure that the United States of America is a better, stronger place for the next generation so that they can continue the project of improving life here. What constitutes a stronger, better America is debated every day on Capitol Hill, not far from here. Many of us will come down on the same side of most of those debates. Most of you here truly believe that the American people have the answers to the problems that our nation faces, not the government, and I couldn't agree more. But lately there has been a softening of the conservative movement on the issue of drug legalization. As if to compensate for the ever-encroaching federal government, we can at least join with our libertarian friends and liberalize this aspect of our life. Conservatives have plenty in common with libertarians, but I would suggest this is not one of them. We talk of restoring the American dream for our kids and giving them opportunities that we didn't have. In all of the debates, in all of the discussions about how to make America a better, stronger country, never has anyone offered or suggested that legalized marijuana is a way to succeed. In fact, I will argue this afternoon that making this mind-altering drug more available to Americans, especially to our adolescents and our youth, we will contribute to the destruction of the character and the spirit that is America. Effective conservative political policies are conceived with an understanding of reality, the world as it is, and an appreciation of unchanging human nature. Are we really prepared to suggest an alternative for people that involves dimming their faculties and decreasing their motivation to improve what they dislike about their situation? Can anyone tell me that making marijuana legal will contribute to our greatness, or that medicating away pain is an alternative to fixing our problems? The debate is ongoing among Americans, with skeptical but permissive older people thinking that marijuana is relatively benign and it's the product of the 60s and 70s. For any formal radicals who might be here, if you set down your last joint in 1968, please, you should be aware that the strength of marijuana has increased dramatically, and the technology of concentrating and isolating the mind-altering components is, as you would expect, always improving. You may consider LSD a more useful benchmark for some of the most concentrated extract forms of the cannabis that's now available. When you look at the increase in potency, it is obvious that this is increasingly not a safe, natural, or soft drug. In order to have a meaningful debate here this afternoon, we must begin with the reality of the condensed, refined cannabis and its derivatives that are grown, processed, and openly sold today in the United States. I have spent the greater part of my professional career, as was mentioned, in healthcare. Early in my career, we knew there was a connection between tobacco and serious health problems, but we didn't fully understand the cause and effect relationship. In some ways, we are in a similar situation today. There is presently a nascent but underdeveloped recognition of the very real, life-changing effects of marijuana, especially to the adolescent mind. The question must be asked, what good does it possibly do for a young person to ingest marijuana? Does it improve their performance in schools, in sports, in relationships with their parents or others? No good does or will come from a teenager who takes these mind-altering drugs. Well, you might say these drugs are not intended for those under 21 years old. But it is self-evident that increased distribution of these substances will result in the consumption of underage people. 10 million, nearly 10 million underage people currently use alcohol, and nearly 6 million of them are considered binge drinkers. 25% of all high school students use tobacco products semi-regularly today. They can and they are obtaining these poisons. Addictions and addictive behaviors generally begin before 21, and there is plenty of evidence that marijuana causes dependence. Indeed, the teen mind appears to be exclusively, but not exclusively, susceptible. You will hear me talk about depression, long-term memory loss, and other psychoses, lifelong, serious, debilitating brain damage, and malformation. as well as an average drop in well-being across the population that consumes the substances. The Institute of Psychiatry at King's College in London recently revealed that as many as a quarter, yes, 1/4, of all new cases of psychotic mental illness can be blamed on the stronger strains and the higher ingestion of cannabis. Setting aside the brain scrambling mental effects for a moment, the American Lung Association reports that there are 33 cancer-causing chemicals contained in marijuana. It deposits tar in the lungs, and in fact, when cigarettes and marijuana are ingested together, marijuana deposits 4 times as much tar as cigarettes. The health effects of these substances are varied and manifold and colored from harmful to catastrophic. I look forward to our debate this afternoon. Thank you.
I would like to say that having a debate right now over whether or not to legalize marijuana is like having a debate over whether the sun is going to come up tomorrow. The sun is going to come up tomorrow. We are going to legalize marijuana. One thing I like to tell people is that, number one, I'm an athlete. I've been an athlete my entire life. My whole life is about fitness, it's about wellness, and that's mind, and that's body. And I'm also an entrepreneur. I've been an entrepreneur my entire life. I have a wonderful family. I'm about to be a grandfather. I'm in the midst of a very, very loving relationship with a woman that I've been engaged to now for 5.5 years. Maybe at some point we're going to actually get married. And I was also governor of New Mexico. I was governor of New Mexico for 8 years. And as governor, one of the promises that I made to the citizens of New Mexico was I was going to bring a common sense business approach to state government. Best product, best service, lowest price. And in that context, I came to recognize that half of what we spend on law enforcement, half of what we spend on the courts, and half of what we spend on the prisons is drug-related, and to what end? Well, that end is that we put a lot of people in jail. I am one of the 100 million Americans who have used marijuana. And I want to say that you could argue all day long that maybe that's not the smartest choice that I could have made, or that any of us make, but I am anything but criminal for having done that. And I think President Obama is in that same category, and I think the last few presidents have also been in that category. We're not criminal for having done this. My current occupation is that I am CEO and president of a publicly traded company, Cannabis Sativa Incorporated. We're publicly traded. We have a $100 million market cap, and it is in the marijuana space. And the reason that I'm doing this is, Anne-Marie, it's actually to make the world a better place. And it's a better place from the standpoint of the medical side of marijuana. Let me offer you a prediction. In 20 years, 20% of all pharmaceuticals will be cannabis-based. When you take marijuana with THC, it is a direct competitor to legal prescription painkillers that statistically kill 100,000 people a year. Marijuana has statistically, or has not been shown to kill anyone. So that's on the painkiller side. Do you realize that CBD is something, it's the oil derived from the cannabis plant. It does not have THC in it. But do you realize that this is like a miracle drug? If the cannabis plant were discovered tomorrow in the Amazon, it would be declared as the greatest human discovery of all time. This stuff really has genuine healing properties to it. CBD, kids, Sanjay Gupta. How many saw the Sanjay Gupta thing where Sanjay Gupta comes out and says, hey, I was wrong on marijuana. I was wrong on marijuana. Kids with epilepsy that take CBD oil have their epilepsy dramatically decreased. I was talking to a researcher in Seattle this summer. He was working with a young woman at 13 who was having 300 epileptic seizures a week. He gave her 4 units of CBD and the seizures dropped to 50 a week. Now, right now, Republicans are are proclaiming this is CBD oil, this is okay, it doesn't contain THC. Well, this researcher gave this young lady 1 unit of THC, and the seizures dropped from 300 to 50 to 8. If it would have been whole plant, perhaps the seizures would go away completely. So this stuff works on, this is anecdotally, but it needs to go along with research and development, is this stuff works on MS, Parkinson's, epilepsy. This has been shown to reduce cancers. And this is anecdotally, but this is the research that needs to happen in this area. This is genuinely make the world a better place because of the healing qualities that go along with that. So all these medical marijuana initiatives, they're for real. They really do make a difference. And then on the recreational side, I have always maintained that legalizing marijuana will lead to less overall substance abuse because people will find this as such a safer alternative than alcohol or the harder drugs that are out there. Another issue out there right now is impairment, okay? Impairment under the use of marijuana. It's something that needs to be established. We don't want people consuming marijuana and getting behind the wheel of a car and driving, right? Well, let me give you a little story here, or the reality is, in Washington State and Colorado, 5 nanograms of marijuana in your system constitutes DUI. 5 nanograms in no way denotes impairment. And let me relate to that by telling you, and I'm going to butcher his last name, Ross Rigobaldi, the Canadian snowboarder, who won an Olympic gold medal in the giant slalom snowboard. After his Olympic winning run, he drug tested, and tested at 15 nanograms in his system, 3 times the DUI limit in Washington State and Colorado. So does it mean that when you use marijuana that you can win an Olympic gold medal in the giant slalom? Well, no. Point is, he was not impaired by 15 nanograms. He had that in his system. Luckily, I'm glad they didn't strip him of his medal. He should have got a double gold medal, right, for having done that. But there are issues out there, and there are issues out there that need to be addressed, and this is where government comes to play. Government needs to protect us against individuals, groups, corporations, foreign governments that would do us harm, and so we want to implement the legalization of marijuana in a way that individuals make their own decisions, but they don't negatively impact the rest of us. Thank you.
Thank you very much, you guys. I'm going to start by asking each of you, and I'll start with Ms. Buerkle over here, about what the other one might say you're ignoring, the costs that you're ignoring. And that is from, I think, this side of the argument. What about the incredible fiscal costs of regulating marijuana, of imprisoning those who are sometimes found only for possession or dealing small amounts, and the ripple effect that that can have? What is your answer to that, and how that affects society? And truly, when it's a cost-benefit analysis, do we come out on the better side?
Well, with regards to incarceration, the ACLU, who is a huge proponent of legalized marijuana, has indicated that the cost of law enforcement in this country is anywhere from $1.2 to $3 billion. That's every state. That's for an annual. That's the annual cost. Now, let's put that number in perspective. That represents about 1/7 or 1/2 of what we as a country contribute to the United Nations as our dues. It's in a $4 trillion budget, that's a very small amount of money. So I don't think that the cost of enforcement is the issue. I think the question really is it worth it? And should we be pursuing it more? One of the things the governor did not mention in his opening remarks was the fact that there is legitimate, the American Psychiatry Association, the American Medical Association, there is legitimate and actually a mounting amount of evidence that indicates that this is harmful, especially to our teenagers, that their minds are at a critical point where they're developing, And what the pro-legal marijuana people want to do is they want to gloss over. They want to make a marijuana, and they've done a masterful job, really a masterful job, in making marijuana sound like it is the be-all and the end-all and the answer to all of our problems. And I would argue, just as we were 50 years ago with tobacco, we are on the cusp of finding out what kind of damage this drug is going to do. As with alcohol, for every dollar that's spent on law enforcement, $10 are spent for social costs. And I suggest to all of you that the cost of marijuana and its use and all of the side effects would be worse. Thank you.
This flows nicely into my question for you, which is the other side would say, well, look, it is a lot stronger than it used to be. People have found incredible ways to make it more potent, and it is not the same as she mentioned, if you put down your last joint in '68, which I did. And that it does have an effect, especially if over an long periods of exposure for young minds especially, and can have emotional impact and intellectual impact on them. What are your answers to those, specifically to the health questions, and whether it might be more enticing or more available to young people?
Well, it seems as though we all joke about the fact that I did it. I did it at one point. And the fact is that half of everybody you associate with, friends, family, co-workers, have done marijuana at one point or another. And if you're honest, I'm sure that more than half the hands in this room will go up as to whether or not you've done marijuana in your lives. Is it the smartest decision that you've ever made? You know what? We can debate about that all night. But is it criminal? Do you want to lock up your parents? Do you want to lock up your kids? Do you want to lock up your coworkers and your friends? Because the reality is that half of them do marijuana. We have tens of millions of Americans in this country who are convicted felons that, but for our drug laws, would otherwise be tax-paying, law-abiding citizens. And that's what this policy has done. And conservatives ought to embrace the fact that these are people making their own decisions. Liberty, freedom, making your own decision. And if you cross over the line, and you're going to do harm to somebody else, then there are consequences to be paid.
If I could just respond to that, because that's such a fiery speech and endorsement of marijuana. And, you know, when you say it's a victimless crime, that's not true. Just find somebody in their family who has had a drug-addicted spouse or child. You ask them if it's victimless. It affects spouses, it affects siblings, it affects families. The cost, you can't measure the cost, lost productivity. So despite the fact that this whole issue about it's not criminal, well, so I think that the suggestion is, well, let's get rid of laws because that will decrease the crime rate. And as a nation, our question should be, is this safe? Is this harmful to especially to our youth? We talk about the future of this country. They are the future of this country. And if they have access to legalized marijuana, and when you make something legal, in a young person's mind, it becomes moral. It becomes okay. It's a tacit okay, and it's okay to use it because we trust you, you made it legal, so it must not be harmful. And I think that's a terrible disservice we're doing to our young folks.
Now,
all these stories. No, all these stories about people and addictions and the problems that exist because of the use of marijuana, these are true stories. These happen. This is part of the consumption of any of these products. Those things happen. But let me tell you, the issue is compounded 1,000% when it's criminal and you go to jail for doing those things. And if you want to lock up 100 million people, I'm going to be one of them, then be prepared to do that. Be prepared to do that, and we're not prepared to do that because that's your parents, that's your kids, that's your coworkers, that's your friends. It's everybody that you know.
To his point, hold on, and I'll stand up if I need to. To his point, when it comes to regulating something as to is this safe, it's always a sliding scale when it comes to liberty and what we're going to regulate.
Right.
We don't regulate alcohol in the same way as marijuana in many, or we regulate alcohol as a legal product in a way that we don't marijuana in many places. And some would argue, okay, people on alcohol have more violent tendencies than those on marijuana. So we're always on this sliding scale, and there is a social cost to pay when many people are jailed for it. Speak to that.
Well, you know, if you're saying that because marijuana may be safer than cigarettes, we should add it to the other two poisons so that the American people and our youth have access to it. So first of all, and this issue of incarceration and making it criminal, your chances of going to prison for smoking a joint is like 1 in 12,000. The percentage of people who are incarcerated for the use of marijuana is less than 1%. The reason people are in jail because of marijuana is because they're distributing it or they're selling it. So the argument of the cost of incarceration and law enforcement is specious. The bigger question is marijuana harmful to the future of this country? Do we want to stupefy our youth? Do we want to put everyone in what Adolf Huxley calls, a willingness of servitude and a dullness? That's what marijuana and drugs do. They affect the way the brain works. They affect the levels of dopamine. There's very real facts about marijuana that we want to gloss over, and we want to go to the good points about it. Yes, we can have medical marijuana, but it should be done through a pharmacy. It should be done so that it's careful and it's measured and it's not available to all the kids. Okay.
Anybody do the math on 1 in 12,000? Well, the math on 1 in 12,000 is that we're arresting 1.8 million people a year in this country. And I got to tell you, I think resources when it comes to law enforcement, the courts, and the prisons could be much better directed than arresting 1.8 million people.
Well, I guess I would say to that, we arrest 1 million people a year for DUIs. We arrest 1 million people for larceny and grand theft. And still there's DUIs and still there's larceny. And so the question, well, do we get rid of those laws because we can't keep up, because we don't have the resources to treat? No, we don't, because as a society we say they're dangerous. And that's what I'm saying about marijuana. It is documented, and it is really, there's a mounting. I implore all of you to explore the mounting evidence against the legal use of marijuana.
Now, question. Part of any new set of laws, even in a recreational legal sense in Colorado or Washington, would prohibit use by minors. So isn't that the same as the current system when it comes to exposing minors?
Well, the reality of it is, and I mentioned it in my opening statement, alcohol is meant for kids over 21, cigarettes over 18. There's 10 million teenagers in this underage population who now drink. 6 million of them are considered binge drinkers. Same with tobacco. 25% of our high school kids are using tobacco. So if we make it accessible, more accessible, and if you look in Colorado and you look in Washington State, what's happening, the number of teenage abuse centers, they've sixfold, they've increased the problems with drug addiction for youth. It's a very real problem, and to gloss over it and to make it sound like it's a panacea, you may solve one problem, you may stop that epilepsy, and in fact there is a way, as I mentioned, about dealing with legal marijuana, but the problems that it creates, the complications that the way it impacts a family of someone who has an addiction is far, far exceeds any value of legalizing marijuana.
Same question to you about the access to minors and perhaps what we have learned in Colorado and Washington.
So the message to my kids was, I'd be crazy if I didn't recognize that the two of you, my son and my daughter, wouldn't at some point become exposed to illegal drugs. Now, when it comes to illegal drugs, let me tell you why the danger here. It's quality, quantity unknown. It's prohibition. I would be crazy to recognize that you're not going to come in contact with these. I'd be crazy to not recognize that you may try it. but I love you both. So the message that I want to tell you is that I love you. I love you, period. And so if you find yourself in a situation where you consume any of this stuff, and by the way, on the harder drugs, don't do it, because it is quality, quantity unknown. But if you smoke marijuana, if you find yourself in a position where you're impaired, call me. I will come pick you up, no questions asked, because I love you. And that's the message that we ought to be sending. But the message that we're sending is that if you do marijuana, you're going to get arrested at some point. You're going to get arrested, and believe me, 1.8 million arrests a year. There isn't, actually, you probably, all of you, know people who have actually been arrested, are convicted felons, maybe sitting in this room, that have never admitted that, because it is such a stigma. It's the arrest, it's the incarceration, it's personal responsibility, it's individual freedom. Let me make decisions. When I cross the line, when I put another person in harm's way, so talking about other laws like murder, should we do away with the law on murder? Well, murder is harming someone else, and that's always going to be against the law. When you do harm to someone else, you should pay the consequence, and that is one of government's fundamental roles. But making a choice on what I consume, legislatures, are they going to start passing laws on trans fats and the amount of trans fats that we can eat? I don't eat any trans fats. It's not a good idea. Stop eating donuts. I have celiac disease. Stop eating wheat. It is poison. It is. But should it be against the law? Should it be criminal for consuming these things, that I'm the only one who ends up suffering the consequence, if you will? When I cross over the line, there should be a consequence.
But to be fair, on a policy level, we can't just say, I love you, America, call me if you need a ride, right?
Yeah, we can. Yeah, we can. By legalizing marijuana and saying, and telling the truth. May I tell you a story? Judges in Portland, Oregon asked me to meet with them. This was when I was governor of New Mexico. I had no idea what this meeting was going to entail. I meet with 5 judges. They said, Governor, we're here to tell you that what you're saying is right on, but we would like to tell you a story that you might pass on to others that will better educate others. They said that methamphetamine is really the boogeyman drug. I mean, you do methamphetamine, you do crazy things, your behavior is altered. These are the judges talking. And so the consequences fall disparagingly on the poor, those that can least afford it. It's the best example, they said, of a prohibition drug. Methamphetamine would not exist but for prohibition. Cheap, easy to make, disparagingly falls on the poor. They said the following, and we're not suggesting this, Governor, but if cocaine were legal, these people would be using cocaine without the negative behavioral consequence of methamphetamine. Now let me tell you for a second about cocaine. Cocaine does not have the negative behavioral consequences, but it literally puts holes in your heart. Do you really want to be putting holes in your heart? The typical cocaine user ends up dying before they're 50 from cardiac arrest, like Whitney Houston. That's the typical cocaine user.
Well,
How about the weed when it comes to
let's talk about marijuana. You have a 1 in 5, a higher chance of having a heart attack within the first hour after you smoke marijuana. There are legitimate side effects of this drug. The THC, when in the 60s, you know, I think the governor has had great fun with his humor, but this isn't it isn't funny that we're putting our kids and the future of this country at risk. It's not funny. It is something that we as Americans have got to pay attention to. THC, which is the mind-altering portion of marijuana, back in the 60s and 70s was anywhere from 1 to 3%. Today, it's anywhere from 15 to 17%. It can go. The University of Mississippi did a study, and they were out there seeing it at 30% higher. So it's significantly different. And this humor that's applied to the issue, it's disingenuous. It's really reprehensible because there are real side effects to the legalization of marijuana.
All right, we're coming to the close here. So I want to go real quick to both of you. First, to Representative Buerkle. The numbers as far as people who are okay with legalization have been moving in the pro-legalization direction. What is the next step for your side of the argument, and what place can they have in a place like Washington or Colorado where lawmaking is ongoing?
Well, it's ironic because as the evidence mounts against all of the problems that marijuana can cause, there is a public sentiment moving away from that. It's very ironic, but I want you to know, and I want you to look into this, there is a movement that's been going on for decades. You know the name George Soros? George Soros is very interested in this topic, and he has given hundreds of millions of dollars to the cause. He is on the board of an organization that advances the reputation of marijuana. Because if we believe that it's healthy and we believe there's no side effects and we believe it's safer than alcohol, then people will be inclined to use it much more freely. And people like George Soros, but especially the governor, who are involved with companies that sell marijuana, have nothing to gain unless marijuana is legalized and unless the majority of Americans become dependent on that drug.
Governor Johnson? Without keeling over, what's next for you guys on your side of the debate, and speak to some of these popularity numbers?
Well, right now, and in 1999, I said the same things that I'm saying right now when the support for legalizing marijuana was at about 30% of the American public. Today, it's 60% of the American public, and I think that it's growing. Colorado right now, where my son lives, it's a vibrant place. I talked to someone the other day who said, you know, talking about property values in Colorado, that when they legalized pot, property values went up 20%. Now that's anecdotal, and who's to believe that? But I just have to tell you that Colorado really is a vibrant place, and it's a wonderful place to live. So I'm going to predict for you that all of the initiatives, right now, medical marijuana is legal in 24 states. Recreational marijuana is legal in 4 states and the Washington, D.C. All of those places that I just mentioned where it's legal have happened by ballot initiative. It's never been defeated at the ballot box. And if you're thinking, gee, they defeated it in Florida, actually Florida had to have 60%, and the vote in Florida was 58% for the legalization of marijuana on the medical side. So I'm going to predict that California is going to legalize by ballot in 2016, and after they do that, I'm believing that there will probably be 25 state legislatures overnight that literally do this overnight rather than seeing it go to the ballot box. When it comes, I said it was 60 to 40. When it comes to polling numbers right now, I think among youth, it's probably more like 80 to 20. And what is the future of politics if not the youth? And I just think that this is going to happen. It's good to understand the issues that surround this. And I will end by saying I come back to why I'm involved in it. I'm involved in it because I really genuinely believe this does make the world a better place. That is from the medical side, and that is from the recreational side, that it is so much safer.
If I could get a word in edgewise, I just want to end, because we're wrapping up this session, I want to end with Peter Hitchens. Peter Hitchens is a British journalist who really is against marijuana legalization, and we've heard the word freedom so many times. Here's his quote: "The freedom to stupefy yourself is not comparable to the great freedoms of thought, speech, and assembly." Don't compare the right to stupefy yourself with the legalization of marijuana.
All right, thank you to both of you. Representative Anne-Marie Buerkle, Governor Johnson. I thought about making it the first annual drum circle here at CPAC, but I think it went pretty well in this format. We're out.